61. We measure national income by this method. D. All of the above. 62. According to the supply side of the vicious circle theory of development, a country is poor because b. It was previously too poor to save and invest. 63. Real GNP is a crude measure of national welfare because it excludes d. Work in the home. 64. In the economy, when a steel producer sells steel to car producer, it is regarded as b. an intermediate good. 65. The pattern of economic growth describes the phenomenon of countries moving up in technological development by following the patterns of countries ahead of them in the development process. A. Flying geese. 66. Which of the following is not a function of a commercial bank? D. Banker to the government. 67. When actual inflation exceeds expected inflation? D. Unemployment is less than the natural rate of unemployment. 68. The Harrod Domar growth model suggests that a. Growth is directly related to savings and inversely related to the capital/output ratio. 69. A. Price floor. D. Sets a legal minimum on the price at which a good can be sold. 70. For an inferior good? A. The price elasticity of demand is negative, the income elasticity of demand is negative. 71. If the total product of 2 workers is 80 and the total product of 3 workers is 90, then the average product of the third worker is and the marginal product of the third worker is D. 30, 10. 72. What is national debt or public debt? D. All of these. 73. A tax placed on a good that is a necessity for consumers will likely generate a tax burden. C. Falls more heavily on buyers. 74. What does price elasticity of demand measure? C. The responsiveness of demand to price changes. 75. Governmental non-interference in commerce is called b. Laissez-faire, also laissez-faire. 76. A graph showing all the combinations capital and labor available for a given total cost is the b. ISO cost line. 77. All of the following are trade problems of developing countries except b. Improving terms of trade. 78. A fall in price? C. May be caused by a fall in demand. 79. Government levy tax on imports and exports. What this tax is called? C. Tariff. 80. For which of the following products would the burden of a tax likely fall more heavily on the sellers? D. Entertainment. 81. Along a short-run Phillips curve? A. A higher rate of inflation is associated with a lower unemployment rate. 82. The key issues of macroeconomics are D. All of the above. 83. What is referred by the term portfolio? A. A collection of investments, real or financial. 84. Mention an international trade policy, competitive devaluation and increased protective barriers that one country institute to gain at the expense of its trading partners. D. Beggar thy neighbor. 85. According to the law of diminishing utility? D. The total utility will rise at a falling rate as more units are consumed. 86. Diminishing marginal return implies D. Increasing marginal costs. 87. A firm in perfectly competitive industry is producing 50 units, its profit maximizing quantity. Industry price is £2 and total fixed costs and total variable cost are £25 and £40 respectively. The firm's economic profit is A. £35. 88. Two countries can gain from foreign trade if D, A and C are correct. 89. Poor developing countries typically impose tariffs than rich advanced nations on imports. B. Higher. 90. A binding price ceiling creates C is shortage. 91. What is economic self-interest, according to economists? A. Is a reality that underlies economic behavior. 92. Feudalism was undercut by null. 93. Which of the following is a withdrawal from the circular flow income stream? C. Taxation. 94. Hong Kong and South Korea are examples of developing nations that have recently pursued industrialization policies. B. Export promotion. 95. What is called an Internet strategy of dealing directly with business rather than consumer? A. B2B. 96. For the oil importing countries, the increase in oil prices in 1970s and early 2000s contributed to all of the following except D. Improving terms of trade. 97. What is called a country's total financial obligations to the rest of the world? D. External debt. 98. If the product is an inferior good, demand is A. Inversely related to income. 99. Who was not a classical economist? D. John Maynard Keynes. 100. The formula for average variable cost, AVC, is D. TVC/Q. 101. Depression is a drastic decline in a national of international economy. Its characteristic is D. All of these. 102. An increase in price all other things unchanged leads to D. An extension of supply. 103. The natural rate hypothesis argues that A. In the long run, the unemployment rate returns to the natural rate, regardless of inflation. 104. Which of the following statements about the burden of a tax is correct? C. The distribution of the burden of a tax is determined by the relative elasticities of determined by legislation. 105. Surplus labor theories assume that C. The marginal products of labor are closed to zero in LDCs. 106. Which of the following is a price that is equal to the face value of a security? C. At PAR. 107. What is GNP? C. The market value of all goods and services produced in an economy. 108. What is the period called 12 months plan of a country to use its funds? D. Fiscal year, FI. 109. Which best describes a supply curve? B. The quantity producers are willing and able to sell at each and every price, all other things unchanged. 110. What occurs when a firm's business is terminated? Assets are sold, proceeds are used to pay creditors, and any leftovers are distributed to shareholders? D. Liquidation. 111. what is referred by the working capital? See both of them. 112. During the 1980s and 1990s, a period of economic conservative governments, a leading approach among development economists was null. 113. What is gross domestic product, GDP? A. Value of all economic activity within a nation's border. 114. Percentage of total industry sales that a particular company controls is called B. Market share. 115. Term the authorization, whether written or electronic, that shareholders' votes may be cast by others. A. Proxy vote. 116. Suppose that the firms collude and become a cartel. The best level of output for the cartel as a whole is the price equals and profits total. B. 4 million barrels per day, $80, $160 million. 117. What is inflation? A. Increase in the amount of circulating money. 118. The GDP growth rate of Pakistan 2017-18 was recorded at B. 5.79%. 119. Adam Smith advocated E. All of the above. 120. What is free port? See where no export or import duties are levied. 121. Injection into the circular flow are and. See investment, government expenditure, exports. 122. If the sacrifice ratio is 5, a reduction in inflation from 7% to 3% would require A. A reduction in output of 20%. 123. To be considered a good candidate for export cartel, a commodity should C. Have a low price elasticity of supply. 124. Which of the following statements is false? D. For a market to be contestable, the product must be produced with a labor-intensive technology. 125. In economics, the pleasure, happiness, or satisfaction received from a product are known as D. Utility. 126. The vicious circle theory states that D. Low per capita incomes creates low savings that keep incomes low. 127. Suppose Handel's ice cream experiences economies of scale up to a certain point and diseconomies of scale beyond that point. Its long-run average cost curve is most likely to be B. U-shaped. 128. Transportation and trade are C. Tertiary activities. 129. Baran's neo-Marxist thesis has been criticized for ignoring the probability that power is frequently C. transferred from one elite to another when a revolution occurs. 130. What is a trade name? D. All of them.